Hey girls, it's Miss Gaska. I'm here with you today going over 4.2, the activity in the 7th grade Springboard book for language arts. So this activity is a little long, so it may need to be divided into multiple sections. Let's just see where it goes. So to begin with, we're doing using language for effect. Our learning targets are going to be 1, to analyze the use of vocabulary, diction, punctuation, and musical devices in poetry. Ooh. Number 2, apply an analysis of a poem's meaning and form to an oral interpretation. So the poem's meaning and form, we're going to analyze. And then use precise language to compare and contrast 2 poems. All right, so those are the 3 things we're going to focus on mastering by the end of this lesson, or at the very least, learning. So our learning strategies, which are listed over here, are going to be summarizing, questioning the text, rereading, marking the text, note-taking, and drafting. So, preview. In this part of the activity, you will read a poem and think about the way the author uses language. Now, to me, this part right here is the most important part of any of these Springboard activities, the part that says setting a purpose for reading. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and highlight that using my comment bar and my area highlight tool. So, setting a purpose for reading. As you read the poem, underline words and phrases that create an image. So that's one thing we're going to be able to do, or going to need to do, is underlining words and phrases that create an image. All right, and I got that underline tool right here next to the typewriter tool and the pencil and eraser box. The next thing says circle, and right here's my circle, circle unknown words and phrases. Try to determine the meaning of the words by using context clues, word parts, or a dictionary. So we're going to underline words and phrases that create an image. We're going to circle unknown words and phrases. All right? Then our third symbol, as you read, pause at the end of stanzas or in other places where there seems to be a natural break. Write a slash where you pause. And I'm going to circle this slash so that you know that's what we're going to be doing. So, since it's a poem, I'm going to read them with you. And then we're going to do a little bit of the work together, and then I'll let you do some independently as well. So, this poem is Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. So, let's get started. Remember the things that we're going to be doing. We're going to underline images, circle unknown words and phrases, and we're going to put slashes where there seems to be a natural place to pause. All right? So listen to this poem and then we'll go back and do those markings. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. All right, so I think that's a really lovely poem. So let's go back and look for those 3 things. I'm going to give you an example of each so that you'll have an idea of what to do. So let's go to the beginning of the poem. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Well, there's not really any kind of image there. It says woods, but we don't know what kind of woods. We don't know if it's going to be like what type of trees there are. We don't know if it's a lot of trees, if it's just a few trees, if it's a forest, or if it's just like a patch. What is this? We don't know yet. So there's no real image there. His house is in the village, though. Once again, there's no image. We have no idea what kind of house, how big this house is, what color, nothing like that. There's nothing that paints a picture in our mind there. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So now we have somewhat of an image. We have a man stopping, and he's watching the woods fill up with snow. So that creates this image in our heads of snow drifting down and beginning to fill the woods, covering the ground with the snow, and all of that. So we have an image created here. So that's the first image I've underlined. There are several other images in this poem, and it's up to you to identify them and underline them, all right? So the next thing I want to show you is unknown words. Well, the only word I saw here that seems like it's a little bit unknown is queer. We might know this word as a derogatory term, unfortunately, but it also means something else. And you may not know that meaning, so I went ahead and circled it to demonstrate how to identify unknown words and language. So I circled that, and then the last thing that we were supposed to do, if you remember, is we're supposed to add slashes anywhere where there's a natural pause. Well, normally we pause at the end of each line in a poem, so I'm going to go grab my typewriter, and at the end of this line, I'm going to put a slash to show that that's where I've paused, all right? So when you do that, you can, if you want to make it a different color, there's probably a way to do that. That's completely up to you. I'm fine with leaving it blue. So you would go and add slashes wherever you think that there would be a pause, all right? So once you do that, once you're done adding all of your lines, all your circles, all your slashes, we will scroll down and move on to the next part, which should be answering questions about the poem. So I'm continuing. Okay, so our second read says, reread the poem to answer these text-dependent questions. Write any additional questions you have about the text in your reader-writer notebook. Now, I don't have a reader-writer notebook for you guys, but if you do have any other questions about the poem that you want to ask, you could put them over here in the notes. So for instance, a question I have is this poem meant to be literal, like a man stopping by the woods, or is it meant to be a metaphor, like representing something else? So I'm going to type my question in the notes section. Is this poem meant to be literal? Oops. Or is it metaphorical? All right, and so I have the ability to adjust that. I have the ability to add more notes. It's completely up to you what you want to add. All right, so now let's look at the questions. Number 1, what does queer mean in line 5? How do you know? Okay, so we've talked about how the word queer has been used as like a derogatory word before, like insulting, but it also means something different. And we could figure out what it means based on using our background knowledge and our context clues. So check this out. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. So what would a horse think about stopping with there being no farmhouse? So normally a person would want to stop with a farmhouse so the horse could go in and have some shelter, a place that it could eat its hay, drink water, whatever the horse needs, right? So the horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. So there is no farmhouse for the horse to stop at. So the horse must think that the situation is a little bit strange. The reason we figured this out is because we know that horses need a farmhouse. In this case, there is none. So in a normal situation, there would be. The opposite of normal is strange or weird or not normal. So any of those answers are suitable. Put it in your own words. Make sure that you're using a direct quote from the poem when you answer these questions. And I will answer this one with you to give you an example of how I want your questions to be answered. So I said the word queer here means strange or unusual. We know this because the poem says, my little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. And I'm going to put the author's last name and the page number to cite that correctly. This means the normal situation would be stopping where there is a farmhouse. But since there isn't one, the opposite must be true. Okay, so we used complete sentences. We answered all parts of the question. We answered what queer means, and we also answered how we know. And then we also used a direct quote from the text and cited it with the correct citation format. All right, so now that we have that, let's go on to the next one. It says, summarize each stanza of the poem. How does the meaning of the poem develop as the stanzas progress? So usually when you have stanzas, there would be a space between each one, but there isn't a space between each stanza in this case, so I will show you where the stanzas are so you know what to summarize. So here is where there's a first stanza break. All right, here is a second one. Going down. And this is the final stanza break. All right, so let's summarize the first one together so you have an idea of what to do. So for this first one, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So that means the traveler knows the man the woods belong to, but the man is in the village, whoops, and will not see the traveler watching the snowfall in the woods. All right, and that's it. I've summarized the first stanza. All you have to do is summarize the second stanza, third stanza, and fourth stanza. And then that one will be complete for the first part. Now the second part says, how does the meaning of the poem develop as the stanzas progress? So that's kind of like a multi-layered question. The first thing you have to figure out is, what is the meaning of the poem in the first place? What is the poem trying to communicate? The second thing you need to figure out is, how does that meaning grow or develop or change as the poem continues? Okay, and that's the second part of that question. That's what you will be answering in this space here. All right, now notice here on the side, it defines some of those literary terms that it had in the beginning of the section. It says, an oral interpretation is reading aloud a literary text with expression. So that means you're varying the way that you're speaking. The second one says, a rhyme scheme is a consistent pattern of end rhyme throughout a poem. Alliteration is the repetition of a consonant sound at the beginning of a word, like the boy bounced the basketball is an example of alliteration. Assonance is the repetition of identical or similar vowel sounds in neighboring words. For example, Ashley Gaska is a representation of assonance because it repeats that ah sound in Ashley Gaska. All right, and then consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds, which would be like pluck chicken. You have that representation of the CK sound, the k, in the middle of chicken and at the end of pluck. So that's what each of those words means. And then here it says, poetry is meant to be read aloud. Poets are masters of language, who delight in the sense and music of language. When reading poetry, always be aware of how it can be read aloud. An oral interpretation is a speaker's interpretation of the sense and sound of the language of poetry. When reading for the sense of a poem, pay attention to the following: vocabulary, diction, punctuation, and musical devices. So in order to read for the sound of a poem, pay attention to the rhyme, alliteration, assonance, and consonants. Poets use these devices to create a musical effect with language, which is why these devices are called poetic musical devices. All right? So I'm going to stop this lesson here. We're going to continue it in a different video because the videos are limited at 15 minutes. So if you have any questions so far, feel free to leave them in the comment section or message me, whatever is most comfortable to you. All right? See you in the next video.